Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you may be. Glad to be here today again. I'm Roger Gunther. I'm Executive Director for Port Houston, and we're here to talk today some more about infrastructure and the requirement for infrastructure to move freight efficiently. So I'm honored and privileged today to sit down and just have a little discussion with Congressman Dr. Brian Babin. It's an honor to have Dr. Babin here today. Dr. Babin was first elected to Congress in 2014 and has since served on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, going on his 7th year. The congressman has just been a tremendous advocate for Port Houston, a good friend for Port Houston, and as well as the infrastructure across our region's supply chain. Most recently, the congressman led the charge to ensure that federal investment and approvals that we needed were in place to jumpstart the deepening and widening of the Houston Ship Channel, what we call Project 11. And Dr. Babin, Congressman Babin, thank you for being here. Again, you're a true friend of the port, and not only our port, but ports in your district and in the state of Texas. And I'm proud to call you a friend of mine as well. So thank you for being here today, Congressman.
You're quite welcome. It's my honor to be asked. I just want to say welcome to everybody and thank you for having me today. Roger, you know that anything I can do for my district, we certainly do. And I'll tell you, one of our highest priorities has always been the Port of Houston and the Houston Ship Channel.
Well, thank you. So I'll just start out with a few questions, and we'll just get into the conversation, Congressman. But I just want to begin the conversation with one simple question of you.
Sure.
You know, how did you do it? How did you successfully, we started out with the Corps of Engineers getting the chief's report, the authorization in a WRDA bill, the appropriation, and a new start for Project 11, just over the term of just a few months. And, I know you fought hard for that, but why don't you tell us a little bit about, how that transpired and how you were able to help us get what we truly need here in Houston?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I appreciate that. And again, thank you to the Port of Houston and to the Baker Institute Center for Energy Studies. Judge Emmett, thank you to all involved. Well, quite frankly, as I just said, as the highest ranking Texas Republican on transportation and infrastructure in the House of Representatives, this has been a very, very high priority for me for several years. And you added, you talked about authorization, appropriation, and new start, but let's also add construction to that list as well. Simply put, we've reached a critical milestone that was accomplished, like you said, in a very short period of time, which doesn't usually happen because most of the time these types of projects take far longer. But I want to say that maybe only Texans could have gotten this thing done. And I'm proud to be one, and I'm proud to be talking to a bunch of them too. But this project is the culmination of many years of advocating, meeting, several committee meetings with Army Corps of Engineers, the personnel, full committee and subcommittee on water resources on our full committee. Many conversations with Assistant Secretary R.D. James of the Corps of Engineers, including conference calls, visits up here on the Capitol, numerous personal outreaches, several conference calls, and even meetings in person with the Office of Management and Budget on-site visits from senior leadership, officials to the port and the channel. A lot of letters, a lot of amendments, text language in WRDA. The New Start designation was awarded by the previous administration. And I don't want to minimize that at all, folks. The Trump administration was very easy for us to work with. And I'll tell you, Secretary R.D. James is probably one of the better guys that I've ever had to work with in that administration. There was a lot of good ones, but this was a legacy. I kept telling them at OMB and Secretary James, this is going to be a legacy project for you, because this is going to really make a lot of difference in our port that has had a number of different problems, and everybody on this call knows what they are. We went to one-way traffic because of our channel. It just simply wasn't wide and not deep enough to accommodate two-way traffic when you've got these large container vessels that are coming in. So proud to do it. We reached out to a lot of folks, and I don't want to leave anyone out, but I don't want to go down an enormous list. I've already mentioned several of you all. But quite frankly, I think former governor and former Secretary of Energy Rick Perry also helped us out quite a bit in that as well. So I hope that satisfies you.
Well, it's been very satisfying, and I know it's a tremendous effort. Your position there on transportation and infrastructure has been very influential, not just for our port, but you got the Sabine Neches waterway as well in your district, which is expanding as well. So ports are
Cedar Bayou project done as well. Down
Cedar Bayou, absolutely, and and just a little bit. You touched on it a little bit, but with all these efforts that are needed to get all this stuff accomplished. We started in 2014 with the ability as the Port of Houston Authority to partner with the Corps, to study this project all the way through now the culmination. Hey, we're about to start turning dirt right on the channel. Can you give everybody in attendance today the importance of this widening and deepening of the Houston ship channel? I mean, we're the energy capital of the world, right?
Absolutely. The epicenter of energy for the United States of America and the world, I would say.
And I'm assuming, just within your district as well, the importance of that. To maybe you can elaborate a little bit of the importance, just your district, of what these channels entail for the economic activity and support that we get for our region.
I could not overemphasize the importance of this project. I mentioned a little bit of it after your first question, but look, what happens at the Port of Houston affects the energy bills of all Americans. You think about that. It affects the prices of fuel at the pumps. It affects our taxes, our food supply, our national security. We all saw how rapidly the increase in gasoline prices after several of our Texas hurricanes hit us. The folks up in Minnesota, folks all in Wisconsin, California, all around, they saw immediate spikes in their gasoline prices when the Port of Houston shut down. After Harvey was just one good example. This project's going to affect the everyday lives of millions of people all across this country. It underscores the importance of growing the channel to meet these growing needs and demands of our expanding economy. And completing this project is absolutely the key to our country's economic success, and especially to Southeast Texas and the Houston region. It couldn't be more important. And so, as you said earlier, we're the epicenter of energy, and plays an enormously vital role in our global commerce. And I think the Port of Houston, the busiest port in the country now, is a great representation of our technological ingenuity, our global dominance and the booming economy, in spite of the fact that this current administration, on very first day, first week of his administration, issued a number of very damaging, I thought, executive orders that greatly harmed, I think, the fossil fuel industry. Fracking permits were going to be disallowed on public lands, and that includes offshore. They revoked the Keystone XL pipeline permit. That was 11,000 jobs that went away. And quite frankly, the loss of $1.6 billion in gross wages. And we've already heard that President Biden's energy secretary said that the safest and best way to transport a product, and from a statistical standpoint, is pipelines. And when he revoked the Keystone permit, I think it eliminated one of the safest ways of transporting our oil and gas. So we absolutely have got to keep maintaining our number one position. Texas has got, as far as production, refining. I represent more refining facilities and petrochemical facilities than any other district in the country. And very proud of that fact and honored to have it. Listen, having a viable Port of Houston, a widened and deepened 52-mile-long Houston ship channel, it couldn't be more important. Thanks for that question.
Well, and thank you. We appreciate, you carrying that message, because it is impactful to across the nation. Again, the largest port by tonnage in the U.S. And you mentioned disruptions, and that always rises to the forefront, even, back in Harvey and even during the recent freeze, for instance. Right. There's a saying that someone said, hey, when the Houston Ship Channel sneezes, the rest of the country catches a cold. So it's very impactful, across the nation. But along those lines, a little bit more about infrastructure. And Congressman, infrastructure investment has been the headline recently over the last few months in Washington. And so far, we've seen some proposals presented by the White House, Congress, and now a group of senators. Given your experience both in the minority and majority in the House T&I Infrastructure Committee, how do you see this infrastructure package getting across the finish line? And furthermore, how will this benefit us here in the greater Houston area in our region? So I know it's a big subject right now, and what can we expect of getting that thing done?
Well, an infrastructure package absolutely needs to be done. We said this during the 4 years of President Trump. We've worked on different projects. We've gotten some of them, funded and authorized and funded, as we've been talking about. And I actually voted for a great infrastructure package back in 2015, a $300 billion package, which I thought was serviced and really did some really good things for the country, especially our region. But in seeing the diverging proposals presented by President Biden, the Congress, the Democrats in Congress, and now by a group of senators, Republican senators, I think we've got this package. I hate to say this, it's trillions of dollars, about $2 trillion bucks, and less than 6% of this total goes towards improving roads and bridges, and less than 20% of that plan will go towards total transportation infrastructure issues. And but the good news is President Biden is reaching out. We've had a number of senators, as you mentioned, the Republicans, to go and visit with him. And the good news is maybe we'll have a seat at the table. But so far, you've got from a $300 billion package just 5 years ago Now they're proposing a $2 trillion package, and it's let's face it, 75% of it has nothing to do with traditional infrastructure. I don't know how you can come and call it. Let me just back up a little bit. When everything is infrastructure, nothing's infrastructure. And when you have elder care, child care, you've got electric vehicle manufacturing, on and on. A lot of this $2 trillion package has nothing to do with what I would call traditional infrastructure that anybody on this call would, I think, would agree with. And so it's important for us to move forward in a bipartisan manner. And I'm very cautiously optimistic that we will have, a bipartisan deal here, and we will not break the bank. Because quite frankly, we have an enormous skyrocketing national debt. I think everybody has seen that. Just a few years ago, we had a couple of $1 trillion, and now we're up to 2 trillion. We're going to be very, very rapidly at $30 trillion. And it's hard for a lot of folks to wrap their minds around what a trillion is with a T. I'll give you a quick example. If you had $1 trillion to spend at $1 a second, $1 a second, you could spend it. It would take you 31,000 years to spend that $1 trillion. And so that just tells you how much we're going into debt and how rapidly we're going into debt. And again, our country is definitely in need of improvements to our infrastructure, plain and simple, especially here in the Houston, Southeast Texas region. Along with our port infrastructure, I'm actively working on other ones, enhancing and expanding our interstate system in Texas. We've gotten an Interstate 14 authorized across the state of Texas from Fort Bliss out in West Texas all the way to Georgia. We've gotten it authorized, but now we've got to start funding it. We're working on coastal surge protection, storm surge protection to help mitigate against flooding, as we've seen on unfortunately too many cases. And finally, we've got again to control this excessive spending. We've seen a sparking, the old inflation rearing its head. I'm old enough to remember back in the 70s when we had inflation of 16, 18, 20%. And we've got to be very, very careful, not only about skyrocketing debt, but overspending and heating up this economy so much that we wind up with inflation, which could have serious consequences for our economy. So we've got to be very, very careful about that. And but I'm going to say it again. I'm cautiously optimistic. Maybe we'll get a package. I know that Minority Leader McConnell in the Senate said a reasonable number and figure for a good infrastructure package would be around $600 billion, even stretching it up to $800 billion. But let's hope it's reasonable. $2 trillion, it's outrageous.
Well, thank you for those comments, and you're answering many of my questions before I can ask them. But you mentioned the importance of coastal protection, roads and bridges, the landside infrastructure of trade is very important, as was discussed in some of the panels this morning. Just one question that I had, and I see it came up on a Q&A as well, so it's timely. I guess particularly as a port, I know that in the current proposal, there's like $17 billion for port infrastructure in that bill. That's like 1% of the whole infrastructure bill. And in light of the congestion that's occurring, trade's booming, my question is, how might we as ports and stakeholders, engage to ensure that we have, making sure through your committee or whoever, that we have the proper infrastructure investments that we need going forward?
Well, I can assure you of this, Roger. We will be looking at all we don't even know what all is in this thing quite yet. But we will be eyeballing this very carefully and scrutinizing it. And if there's some good things in this, and there will be some good things, I'm not going to, if you're spending $2 trillion, there's got to be some good stuff in it as well. But again, it has to be infrastructure. If everything's infrastructure, nothing's infrastructure. And that's kind of what we're going by. And but if we can get some good things in there for the Port of Houston, for our region, as you said it earlier, my district actually stretches from Harris County all the way over to Louisiana, Orange County. I represent the Sabine Neches Waterway, and actually Port of Beaumont as well too, and Port of Orange. But there will be some good things, and we will be looking at these and weighing in the balance the trade-off about overspending versus things that are going to be good. We've got to evaluate that in a wise way that doesn't break the bank and drive us to a $30 trillion national debt, which I have 17 grandchildren, and I really worry about the future of these grandkids, and the debt is escalating so fast. It could have an effect on my children, and not only my children, but on us, the older generation as well. So we will be looking at that, I promise you.
Well, I know you will, and
we'll talk with you about that as well.
I know you will, and I think that it's just important for, I talk about Houston because that's who I represent, but infrastructure for Texas as the largest exporting state in the country is critical as we move forward. But and I know you've got a hard stop here in 6 or 7 minutes, but I got another question.
Okay.
It's about, in the headlines over the past week or so has been this Colonial Pipeline incident and fuel shortages on the East Coast and the new realities the industry is now facing. So as the energy capital of our country, how do you see energy independence and the continued call for cleaner energy shaping the future of our region?
Well, the attack, in fact, right before our call today, you and I had addressed this. And it's just incredible to see that, over the 4 years of the Trump administration, we encouraged our fossil fuel industry in just about every way we possibly could. And it took us 50 years to get back, I think, to, a energy semi-independent, maybe almost independent, where we were a net exporter of energy. And now all of a sudden we've got gas lines, we've got an attack with this cybersecurity, we've got shortages, we've got gasoline and fuel prices that have gone up, 60 and 75% just in 100 days of this administration. So we've got to be extremely, extremely careful. And we've got an unstable world out there. Not that it was stable under the Trump administration anymore, but it was more so than now. We've got this war going on between Hamas and the Palestinians and Israel in the Middle East, where just a few months, 4 months ahead of this, back during the Trump administration, we were signing the Abraham Accords. We were getting some good deals over there. And we've seen more probably cooperation between some of these Arab nations and Israel than we've ever seen in history. But this colonial attack is just an example of how we've got to have a secure energy infrastructure. And when we don't prioritize and support our energy sector, then we're going to leave our national security open to threats from adversaries. We've got adversaries, folks, and there's no getting around it. I think if we've learned anything through this pandemic, that we've got really some serious adversaries in the Communist Chinese, The past few months, we've seen actions taken unilaterally that could severely impact our energy independence, cut high-paying jobs. Well, I've already talked about that, with some of these executive orders by the president. And so we don't want to be back at the mercy of OPEC, the Middle Eastern sheiks, and that puts us in a vulnerable, costly position that will threaten our national security. And I want to say this too. The Green New Deal is an enormous threat, I think, to the fossil fuels and to the economy of our country. No nation on the face of this planet has cleaned up their emissions and cut emissions any more than we have, and reduced our carbon footprint any more than we have. We have done a really great job. And I'm not going to deny that there is a climate change that is happening. We've seen more weird weather. We saw, Winter Storm Uri. We've seen a hurricane after hurricane. We've got some real changes. How much we can attribute this to our carbon footprint, I don't know. I have no idea. But we are cleaning up our act, and I don't think that we necessarily need to be part of the Paris Accords and begin to subsidize nations like China and India. And China is the greatest polluter on the face of the earth as well. And for them to take another 9 to 10 years to start reducing their carbon footprint when they've got this great economy, they're trying to supplant us and replace us as the number one power in the world. I think it's a shame, and I really disagree with the administration putting us back in the climate into the climate accords from Paris. But we have a lot of innovation, smart people in this country, and a lot of them live in my district, in the 36th district, and where you folks are, where you are right now. We've got some inventions, we've got some innovations, we've got carbon capture. When we put our minds to things, and I think a great example was it was like a Manhattan project when the A-bomb was developed during World War II, was this project Warp Speed in developing vaccines in 9 months. Nobody thought, they laughed at Trump when he said that he was going to do this within a year. And yet we've got vaccines, and millions of people have been vaccinated in this country, and we're not having to wear masks. It's not a mandate anymore. And I'm so glad. I think the best shot in the arm for our economy, the best relief package we could get would be to put folks back to work, get kids back in school. And I'm so glad to see 20 states in this country start reducing the unemployment benefits in their states, because we're having so much trouble getting folks to go back to work. We're paying them more with all these giant packages, trillions of dollars that have been passed during the Biden administration. We're paying people more to not work. We've disincentivized them than to go back to work. So we've got to have new ways to enhance safety, lower emissions, provide affordable energy, and have as we saw during Winter Storm Uri and with ERCOT, we've got to have a reliable base load energy that is critical all the way around. And so that would be my answer to that, and I hope that answered some of it. Any other questions, I'd be glad to take, Roger.
Well, thank you for all of that. And, Congressman, I know it's 12:45 your time. I know you had a hard stop, so I'm not going to ask you any more questions other than, we've got a great group, from literally around the world, from shippers to ocean carriers to labor to all of the above. And appreciate hearing what you have to say. And if you have any ending comments, please feel free to do so. But I really appreciate you taking the time, albeit virtually. it's still not a bad way to have these type of conversations. So
it really, you're exactly right, Roger. This has been a great honor for me to be able to address you all, and thanks again to the Port of Houston and also to the Baker Institute Center for Energy Studies. It's been I think a good visit. I appreciate all these concerns and these questions, and I would also just like to finish up by not only saying thank you, but also telling you that we have an open door policy. We have a great staff in our district as well as up here in Washington. And we would really love to hear from any of you all that have questions or concerns, any advice, anything that you want to add into an infrastructure package or you want to see taken out. I'm all ears. I truly am. You all are the experts when it comes to this. And we want an infrastructure package that's going to benefit us and not break the bank while doing that. And I'm quite frankly very optimistic about things, even with this Green New Deal being, the Democrats are trying to pass this. I really think that our better days are ahead of us in this country, and I'm elated to see the innovation, the smart men and women out there, the great companies and entities out there that lead this country to be the greatest, best one, where we have economic freedom, and we can push back against these adversaries that don't have economic freedom and don't have the same values that we have. America, we need to have a strong America, folks. The world needs us. And so we've got to continue to be that shining city on a hill and push back against socialism and any repression, loss of liberty, and we've got to have law and order. That is one thing that is imperative for a country, and that is to have a constitutional basis and follow the law. We must do that. So with that, I'll yield back and just say thank you again so much, Roger, and all of you on here, Judge Emmett, the rest of you, thank you so very much. God bless.
God bless, and thank you, Congressman. Appreciate what you do for us and all ports in Texas, and appreciate your views today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I'll sign off. God bless.
All right. Take care.
Roger, thank you for engaging in that conversation. It's always good to hear from the congressman. We're at that point of the end of the first day for a few wrap-up comments. As I sit here, I know it's kind of preaching to the choir, but for those of us who have spent a fair amount of our lives dealing with freight transportation, we're always reminded that freight really only comes to mind when something's going wrong. As long as people can go to the store and get whatever they want, and it's readily available, or now they have it delivered to their door, they don't seem to care about the freight system. Let it get out of sync just a little bit, and suddenly people become very concerned. So this morning we've heard from shippers, the people who actually own the freight, the ports, the labor who work in the ports, policymakers, experts who in moving freight in a resilient way and efficiently and safely. And tomorrow we're going to get to hear from some of the carriers, particularly talking about how are they going to move freight in a lower carbon environment. But the end of, I always keep coming back to the old saying in politics, freight doesn't vote. Whenever you hear people talk about highway improvements or any transportation improvements, they tend to talk about the impact on commuters or passengers, and seldom do they really think about the impact on freight. So if we're rebuilding an interstate highway, for example, and the debate is between the neighborhood affected and the commuters that are affected, and everybody forgets about the trucks that are having to go out of the port of Houston to Dallas, Fort Worth, for example, that needs to be part of the conversation, because history is replete with examples of countries that just ran out of steam economically because they couldn't move freight. And you can find that time after time after time. So this morning's discussion focused a lot on how do we make sure that that freight transportation system is resilient, and how do we make sure that it's efficient. Now, like I said at one of the earlier panels, if you looked at the way things moved 30 years ago, you would be shocked at the way they move now. And we know that 30 years from now, it's going to be just as dramatic of a change. And a lot of that change is going to revolve around environmental concerns. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow morning. I thank everybody for joining us today. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Ken Medlock, Senior Director here at the Center for Energy Studies at Baker Institute, will kick off the program with setting the stage remarks, and then have a fascinating interview with Jeremy Baines, who's the CEO of Neste North America. And that conversation will be about the role of renewable fuels in moving freight, and we'll go from there. So to all the participants this morning, thank you. To all the audience, thank you. And we hope to see everybody tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.